Hi, everyone. So I'll start. So I'm a senior UX designer at UI Design Studio. I live in NYC. Obviously, a former CareerFoundry graduate. I did the UX course with a UI specialization. And I graduated in about, I want to say June, started my job around July. I guess before I talk more about myself, I'd love to hear more about Gayla.
Yes, hi, happy to be here. I am a career specialist, also an alumni from CareerFoundry. I did the UX uh, immersion course, UI specialization, and job prep, and am a career changer as well. And I currently work as a lead designer with a creative agency here in New York City.
Awesome, welcome. And maybe we'll just start off. We've got some questions for tonight. So maybe firstly, Sheridan, would you like to ask Gayla a question just to kick off the discussion? If you've got any.
So this is something that Gayla and I talked a lot about when we first met each other. We actually have a background in education. So I started off my career teaching English, actually in Taiwan. And so one thing that we talked about and sort of bonded over is that shared background. But I guess what I'm a little bit curious about now is how that background in education sort of prepared you for the design-centered thinking that is so important and necessary in UX design?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a little bit more about my background. I was also a teacher. I taught high school business and technology classes, and then I went on to be a principal, and then later a leadership coach, coaching principals here in the city, and an instructional coach. So working with a lot of teachers and schools. So I've sort of run the whole gamut of the education world. And different parts of that experience really resonated when I decided to go into UX. The teaching, I think, really taught me how to be empathetic and a good listener. And not just with the students, but with a variety of stakeholders, with parents, their perspectives, colleagues, teachers, my supervisors, principals, and superintendents. And not that I wasn't a great listener or communicator before, but I have much stronger skills with that and the empathy. I also was working in cross-functional teams, which we talk about quite a bit in UX design. So I was on my team within my schools, but then I worked with other departments. I partnered with other schools on events, things like that. And as an administrator, I was also fortunate to pilot new programs and new software. And what I didn't realize is I was doing user surveys and usability testing. I would stand by students and have them fill out forms. What's working? What's not? Where are you getting confused? And so all of these things really come together and play a big part into my transferable skills into UX design. Sheridan, what about you? Because you had a different teaching experience teaching with Taiwanese students.
Yeah. So as you were talking, I was just thinking that it's really hard to keep people's attention, but it's extremely hard to keep the attention of small children. And I was teaching kids from about kindergarten to sixth grade. And so keeping their attention for an hour was completely like insane and very difficult to get through. But it sort of relates to UX design. Yesterday, actually, I was holding a workshop for some clients, and these clients really wanted like a 5-hour workshop. And then it comes down to like, how do you keep people's attention for 5 hours? Like, how do you keep them engaged? And I think at the end of the day, I really went back to that like teacher hat in terms of like, how do you hold an engaging interactive workshop where you're sort of encouraging everyone to talk and giving them the space to talk. And so I think that skill definitely translated a lot, particularly maybe in like design consulting, because you're not only dealing with your internal like stakeholders within the company you work for, but also the clients. Yeah, I think that was probably the thing that I took away the most from teaching. So I have another question for you, Gayla.
Okay.
Unless you want to talk about more teaching, which is fine. But
I was just wondering, Sheridan, when was the first time that you heard the word UX design? So when you were teaching, when was the first time that word came up, or you thought, okay, is this a subject that I could be interested in?
That's funny. I was actually talking with my partner about that today, because we were talking about this webinar a bit, and I was, thanking him because I remember it was a couple of years ago. I was working in fundraising, and I wasn't quite sure that was where I wanted to land in my career. And so he handed me a pamphlet of jobs in tech, and he encouraged me to look through it. And I remember going through it and trying to figure out like which jobs could I possibly be interested in tech. And I went through and I saw UX design, and I was like, that seems really interesting. But I remember just like telling him, it's too late for me. I'm too far in my career. Like, it's too late for me to switch now. It would be a lot of work. Like, I can't put in the time. It would probably be too much money. And I remember just telling him, I don't want to read through this pamphlet. And he kept encouraging me to do it, but I just couldn't. And then while I was in school for my MBA, because while it was fundraising, I had the opportunity to go back to school, and they financed my education. It was really the only way I could go back to school, is because they financed my education. I was studying tech product management, and we had a class that was focused on UX design. And so this was the second time I heard it. And we actually did a class where we were building personas. And that was just the most influential class that I've taken, because I couldn't remember enjoying myself so much in any class that I had taken up until then. And so that was really the moment where it clicked, when I thought, I need to make a change if I'm going to be happy, and this is the thing I want to do. And so that was kind of a long answer, but that's where it started for me.
I think that's a great answer, because we also have lots of students from very different backgrounds. And I think also the thing that you said about, feeling that maybe you're a little bit too old to make that change, because I think lots of people forget that they already have a lot of transferable skills that they can bring over into the new position. You're never really starting out at zero. So that's one thing that we like to say. But I'll pass the mic over to Gayla and maybe ask the same question. When was the first time that you heard about UX design?
Yeah, I remember I was ready to leave education, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to have a creative outlet. And I had done some website design, but it was definitely not a passion of mine. But I can't draw, I'm not an illustrator. So I was just looking online, and UX, somehow I came across UX design. I'm like, what is that? That is such a cool term. I think that was the first thing that grabbed my interest, and I started reading, and I was like, oh, wow, this was amazing. And the more I read, the more I thought, yeah, I think I can do this. And then, of course, I started my deep dive into different programs that are out there. Do I want in person or online? And CareerFoundry came up, and I went back and looked at every school again and again, and CareerFoundry was just the way I wanted to go. And I'm so glad I made that transition. And talk about doing that later in life. I was in education for 20 years, so I'm definitely an older career changer. And that is a little scary, coming from a place where you feel successful in where you are, to trying something new and starting out as brand new, entry level. But I made that leap, and I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I feel like that was something I wish I knew earlier, because when I think about the people who are on my UX team now, none of them started studying UX design. They started in industrial design or architecture or psychology or all of these different fields. And so like I anticipated that I would feel out of place as a career changer, but actually I feel very much at home with other people who made a decision later to pursue something that they're interested in. And I think that's the case for probably a lot of designers, UX designers.
Yeah, we don't have that. If you want to be an accountant, there are certain courses you take, and that's the path that you take. But UX design is this huge umbrella of all these different talents and skill sets that come together. And I think that's one of the things I love most about UX design is getting to work with all these amazing people with different backgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone also brings their own perspective as well. So like previous experience, also, you're never going to have a bad experience. You're always going to bring something, whatever industry you've been in. So you're going to see it from a different perspective. And that perspective is really good for company business insights and stuff. What's the kind of have you also had previous students, Gayla, who've come from different industries where you thought, okay, that's really interesting, or?
Yeah, I've had so many students that I worked with, everything from industrial design background, as Sheridan mentioned, to performing arts, in theater and opera. I'm a professional ballet dancer. So graphic design. So some of the things that we think of as, well, you have to be a graphic designer or have that background to get in. But my students are coming from all different places, and they bring their talents and they talk about how they can add value based on their transferable skills and their experience. And that makes it a lot of fun working with these different students.
Sheridan's story. So the topic for this presentation today, or this webinar, is how Sheridan landed a senior UX design role. Lots of students at CareerFoundry end up at junior, mid-level. We do have some who get senior, but maybe Sheridan, just maybe explain the process with how you landed your current job. I think everyone would love to hear that.
Yeah, definitely. So first off, I think I'll start by saying that there was luck involved, for sure. I think that the role that I applied to was really suited towards my skills. Being a consultant and having that experience as a fundraiser, like aligning stakeholders, working with donors, being in very like a client-facing role, I think played a huge part in me being prepared for this role in particular. I'll say in terms of like junior versus senior, to be completely honest, when I applied for my role, I did not know it was a senior position. I thought it just was like UX designer, and it looked like an amazing role. And I remember I actually sent a note to Gayla when I saw the role, because we were in the career prep part of the program. And I was specifically at that part where I was working on my cover letter, and I really wanted to make a good impression and sort of highlight these transferable skills. So I remember Gayla and I worked on like 2 different drafts of my cover letter before I even applied. And then, the process of getting ready for the interview. And then when I finished that process, they actually offered a senior position to me. And I was very surprised because I was not anticipating that. And I think in a lot of ways it made me worried because I was like, wow, now I have a lot more to prove, as a senior designer. That's not what I was expecting. But I'll say that, I think everything that I had experienced up until this point prepared me for that. And at the end of the day, I just really tried not to question their choice to give me a higher level role. I trusted them that they heard enough from me that they needed to in the interview to make that decision. And I guess then it was my job to prove that they made the right decision. So yeah, it was kind of a crazy process.
Sheridan,
sorry. Ahead. No, Gayla, no, go ahead.
Sheridan, I know a lot of students get really nervous during interviews, and there's always a question I encourage students to ask, and they're usually too afraid. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you prepped for this interview, and then that really brave question that you asked at the end that landed you the job?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of prepping for the interview, really spent a lot of time thinking about what skills from fundraising, from my MBA, from teaching, how I could articulate those things in a way that makes it applicable to UX design. So talking about, having more of an external facing role in fundraising, working on aligning with stakeholders, understanding the donor experience, and helping to translate how that would help me work through a user experience was a big part of it. I think being very confident about my portfolio piece that I was presenting, because I had to present a piece of my work, being able to really speak clearly about why I made certain decisions played a huge factor. And I spent a lot of time just like presenting to myself in the mirror to make sure that I was walking people through it in a way that was very clear. And then, as you mentioned, in my last round interview, I asked a question that after I asked it, I was like, oh gosh, I shouldn't have asked that. But I think it was actually like a good thing to ask. And I knew I went into the interview knowing that I don't come from like a traditionally creative background. I didn't have a degree in graphic design. I don't come from like illustration. So I wanted to know from them, and I asked them, at this point, having had a conversation with me for the last hour, like what is what hesitations would you have in offering me this role? And they were very honest with me, and they said that my level of design background was not at the level of people they would normally have in that role. And I told them, like, very honestly, I completely understand that, but I am coming to you with a different skill set, and a skill set that I think that would really benefit your team. I come prepared to really have and build positive relationships with clients, which is a huge part of consulting. Being able to clearly articulate design rationale and be sort of a content strategist. And on the other side, I said, while I don't have that traditional creative background, I think it's important to tell you that I will work really hard to refine that skill. And that's something that I've had to do in many other roles, like be in situations where I'm not entirely confident, but I will work hard to be at the level that you expect from me. And I was really lucky that they trusted me and were willing to give me that chance. I think that a lot of employers might have said, well, no, we really want someone with more of a creative design experience. So I think in that sense, I was really lucky. But I think a big part of it was also articulating what my value is and what I had to offer played a big role.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think sometimes we're afraid to talk about ourselves in that way, and certainly to ask, do you have any reservations in hiring me? But that's one of the most powerful questions you can ask, because you can change their minds, or at least sway them based on what you said, adding value to the company and to the role.
Exactly. I will say, though, that when they do decide to take that chance on you, it does mean that you do have to work harder once you're actually in that role. And I'll say that I've definitely felt that I've had more to prove and stretch myself and learning new skills at a different rate that perhaps someone with more background experience would have to. And that's work that I'm happily and gladly willing to put in, because I really love what I do. And I know I worked hard to be here, but there's just, on the other side, you have to be prepared to actually put in that work and to help to prove that they made the right decision in taking a chance on you.
Yeah, a lot of people are afraid, and there's this term, imposter syndrome. I know I definitely dealt with that. Sheridan, can you tell us a little bit about your experience, maybe before or even after being hired? And is that something you've experienced?
Yep. I think definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome going into a career change. I took a big risk, because I actually left my job and started the CareerFoundry program like fully in. And then once I was fully in, I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? Like, I don't have a creative background. Like, maybe I'd made the wrong choice. I think talking to my colleagues in the program, like I remember doing a couple of those coffee chats. That really helped me out because I realized everyone was in the same place as me. So definitely felt less alone in imposter syndrome. But one thing that was a surprise to me is I expected once I actually got a job that imposter syndrome would go away, because then I'm proving to the world that, like, they hired me. But it doesn't go away. It gets worse. At least it did for me, because now I'm surrounded by people who are extremely skilled and, have more experience, and um, definitely, and still today feel kind of like an imposter. I don't think that completely goes away, but I'm kind of the belief of, like, you fake it till you make it. And I think trying to um, be positive and confident in myself, it's kind of like a learned skill. I don't, maybe it comes naturally to some people, but it doesn't come naturally to me. And so I think, like, every day I try to put on a smile and tell myself that I know what I'm talking about, and try not to be afraid that something that I say will sound stupid or be wrong, because I am in a place of learning. I think also a big part of it is when I started my job, I was very honest with people and telling them where I was at, and telling them, like, this is a new switch for me. This is a career change. I am here to learn, being really open with my colleagues in terms of, like, I want to learn from you. You have this skill. I think it's really impressive, and I want to work on that skill. So I think being really honest with my colleagues played a big role in me not feeling like I'm hiding anything. I'm being open with you in terms of where I'm at today. And doing as much as I can to learn from other people played a big part of it, because if I had gone in on day one and tried to tell myself that, like, I'm the best designer ever and I completely deserve this, I think that I would have been lying to myself, and I wouldn't have been able to, I just would have really stressed me out. So I think being honest is super important.
Just to pick up on the point there, if anyone doesn't know what imposter syndrome is, over on the CareerFoundry blog, we've also got some articles and some previous webinars that we did on that topic. I just want to pick up on one point, Sheridan, because all CareerFoundry students, when they do one of our main programs, complete the portfolio. And that's the kind of takeaway, the key takeaway. And it's also the thing that when you're speaking with your potential new employer, it's something that you present. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about your portfolio and how you presented it, and was it a useful asset to have?
Yeah, I mean, the portfolio is the most important thing to have, because it really proves that you know what you're talking about, and it says everything about your skills. So I definitely spent the most time in the program in my portfolio, and before joining CareerFoundry, I didn't have any portfolio or any work at all. So my portfolio consisted of the pieces that I worked on, as well as a piece I did for fun. And that was the piece I actually ended up presenting to in my interview. I ended up selecting a piece that I felt spoke really well to the role itself. It was a redesign of a financial platform, and I thought that would communicate well my value to a company that works with, like, clients that do financial stuff and accounting and et cetera. So I thought that would speak best to that role. I think that's really important when you're presenting a piece in an interview. Choose the piece that is most closely aligned with what that company does, because then they know you kind of understand their industry and you have some of the skills to articulate what they do. So yeah, I think the portfolio was huge. I think, like, one piece of advice that I had, and something that I'm kind of kicking myself over now that I have more experience and I'm looking back at my portfolio, is that I wish I took even more time with it. I wish I had been more committed to, like, pixel perfection, because at the time I was just rushing to finish it so that I could be in a spot where I had a portfolio and I could start applying to jobs. But at the end of the day, I think the goal is to be employable. And even if your portfolio is good enough to get you a job, once you have that job, you're going to be expected to have like produce pixel perfect pieces. You know, and even if you're like a junior and you're not expected to do that, it really puts you a leg forward. So I wish I had taken more time on my portfolio to really make sure that everything was great, because that, like, in the process of doing those pieces, that's when I learned the most about UX design, like just trying to make things work, just figuring out Figma and Sketch and playing around with stuff and iterating. And I think that the process of putting together the portfolio is so critical. Yeah, I guess the recommendation, just to make it short and sweet, would be to spend as much time as you can on it and don't rush through it.
Gayla?
Oh, I was going to say, you mentioned learning Figma and Sketch. So what do you do when you're in a job and they use tools that you've not used before? How do you approach that?
Yeah, I'll say that is particularly true for consulting, because you're often expected to use the tools that the client is using. And so one client may use Sketch, but another will use Figma, another will use Adobe XD. So there is a lot of being proficient in multiple platforms. And I will say that these platforms are built pretty intuitively. So they're typically like not super hard to learn one from the next. But I guess another recommendation that I have is, if you're in the CareerFoundry program and you have 3 portfolio pieces, try using a different tool for each one, because then you'll come out of it like knowing what you're doing in each tool. And I think that's what I actually ended up doing, but I didn't spend as much time in Sketch, and I think I just got lucky there because I haven't actually had to use Sketch on the job yet. So, and also, like, there are other collaborative softwares I wish I had become more familiar with in the program. Like, you know, we all know that we need to know like Sketch and Figma and Adobe XD, but there's also other things like Mural and Miro, and those are tools that are, I'm pretty sure they're free, and they make work of like putting together like a low fidelity wireframe really fast and easy, and they are collaborative. So, and all of those other platforms like Figma, Adobe, like those are collaborative also. But I'd just say, like, get familiar with some other tools that are out there, because you may end up having to use them.
Sheridan, we've got a couple of questions coming in. Firstly, from Dahlia, what platform did you prefer to build your portfolio?
In terms of like designing the wireframes or like building the portfolio website? For the wireframes and like prototype and stuff, I'll say like 100% Figma is like the thing that I use, because I find it a lot easier. Except with one of my portfolio pieces, I had to do some animation, and I found Adobe XD to be a lot easier to do that. Sketch is not my favorite, but it is important to know because a lot of, you know, teams are still using it. And then for my portfolio website, Gayla was actually really helpful there. We were talking about this before, because I used Squarespace and found it really difficult at first to make everything look the way I wanted to look. And so she had some tips there in terms of like putting in some code to make things look the way I wanted them to. Also spend a lot of time on your portfolio website, making sure that it looks good. I think I spent a lot of time there, and I think Gayla also really pushed me to work on things that I thought were fine, like the About Me. I remember you really pushed me to talk about like my unique design perspective and putting that in there. And that's a really important thing to have on your website, because it sets you apart from other people. So yeah, I definitely got a lot of help there.
One more question that's come through, and it was probably referring to looking at the job search process. But Vidya is asking, did you have a strategic process when you were looking for jobs? So how did you go about looking for jobs, that kind of process?
Yeah, I would say at the very beginning, no. I was like a crazy person, just applying to anything and everything and not even looking at the job description. And I got 0 replies, and it's not a surprise. I didn't even work that hard on my cover letter. I would have like a standard cover letter and I'd adapt it slightly. It was just not working for me. So after like getting really into the career prep course, I started going through things a little bit more slowly, being more strategic in terms of like, these are the skills that I have, being more open to the roles I was applying for. Like I wasn't applying for consulting roles before, but I started opening myself up to that because I realized that that is where I had more to offer. And taking more time with my cover letter played a really huge role, and like personalizing it for each role. It takes more time, but at the end of the day, it's like good practice for when you go into an interview and you do have to talk about yourself and why you want to be in at that particular company, because that is a huge part. Like I had to talk about why I wanted to be at EY Design Studio, and I was able to go back to my cover letter and like remember of all of the companies that I applied to, why did I want to work there? And it's really important to communicate that. So yeah, definitely being more strategic later on, I think helped me actually save time at the end of the day, applying to less roles. So I guess I'd say just like really think about your transferable skills, really think about the company you want to work at, and be focused in your job search rather than apply to like everything out there.
I think that's great advice. Gayla, just a question for you as a CareerFoundry Career Specialist. What would be your kind of like typical advice for, say, a new CareerFoundry student who's just about finished with the program and is starting to apply for those first positions? What kind of advice would you give to that person? Just looking at jobs boards and thinking, oh, what am I going to do?
Yeah, a couple of things. Sheridan touched on this as well. I'm always telling people to go back to their portfolio before they really dive into applying for jobs, because you can waste so much time if your portfolio is not up to standards. You have 200 plus applicants in a typical job posting in 3 days. So how do you stand out among 200 candidates? Your portfolio is key. And I've been in your shoes. I know. I'm like, yeah, just go back and redo this part of the case study, and you need to find another one and change this. That's a lot of time and a lot of work, but it's worth it. If your portfolio doesn't demonstrate how amazing you are, you're not going to get hired. So that would be my first thing. Your energy should really be going into your portfolio, and you need typically 4 to 6 case studies to get hired, and you need real world work. So how do you get that? Like, well, it says I need 3 years experience for an internship. How do I get experience if I can't get even an internship? And it's this conundrum. It's this weird dichotomy that's happening right now in UX design. So volunteer. Do a volunteer project. Help out a family member. Get some client experience, paid or unpaid. That's how you're going to get noticed in your portfolio. And then to take away from some of that stress, you can't take it all away. Schedule your time. Don't sit and stress over your computer 8 hours a day applying for jobs. It's not healthy. And then you lose your creative sense because you're too stressed out or exhausted. So schedule your time. Maybe you like to do it all at once, and all day Monday, that's what you do. Or maybe you just want to do it 1 hour a day and you put it in your calendar, and at this time, this hour, that's all I focus on. But it's not healthy to get into that space of I have to apply. Also, stay away from the LinkedIn easy apply. No good. No, don't do that. That doesn't count.
Yeah, it's like short term, it helps you feel a little bit better because you feel like you're being productive, but thinking long term, it actually doesn't, it's not that conducive to getting a job.
I'll let you in on a little secret. When we post jobs, if people use the easy apply, we automatically discard them. Like, you didn't even take the time. Like, no, you're having brunch with your friends and hit easy apply on your phone. That doesn't count.
One question, Gayla, I think this question's for you. Robert's asking, do you have any recommendations for posting your portfolio online?
I guess I'm not quite sure what that means. I think that it definitely needs to be a website. Behance it's really not the way to go. Maybe in the past people did that. But you really need your own website and not a giant PDF as your case study. Move away from that. Take the time to learn the platform. Figure out, you're going to have to know how to do this anyway. It's not brand new. You're going to at least have to know the basic understanding of web design. So I think you need to have certain components. You need to have a really interesting about page, as Sheridan said. I want to see a picture. Who is this person? What are their hobbies? What makes them different? How do I visualize somebody on my team? Seeing their picture and learning about them as a person. What is it that they love about UX design? Not this generic, I want to save the world and make things user-friendly. Okay, you do, but beyond that, what else can you offer? And I think having your case studies front and center is really important. And usually when we're hiring, when a lot of companies are hiring, we're looking for specific skill sets or experience. Maybe we need somebody who knows native iOS applications. Maybe we just need responsive web design, somebody who can work with desktop. So on your case studies, give us a little blurb. What is this exactly? What's the app about? What type of app is it? And what were your roles? Is this a UX research case study? Because that will probably look a lot different than a UI design case study, or it should. If it doesn't, go back and redo both of them. So I think just being specific and making it as easy as possible for visitors to move through your site. UX, your site.
We've got one question that's come through from Jada, and I think this one's aimed at Sheridan. How did you figure out the industry you wanted to work in? Did you know before you started the course, during, or after?
Yeah, I had no idea before I started the course. And as I started to work through the course and work through some of the assignments, I think I tried to put myself in the shoes of someone who was like working in those specific industries. I think, to be completely honest, especially because I was a career changer, I was open to anything. Like I think I was just so happy to be doing UX design. It didn't matter what like product I was working on or what platform I was building, because I knew I would be able to have that design-centered thinking. And so for me, it didn't matter what product it was, because I knew like what I would be doing would be the same, or at least close to the same. So I think that probably won't be true a couple of years from now. I'll probably have a more clear idea of, what industry I want to be in specifically. But that was also a big reason why consulting appeared to me, because as a consultant, you have the opportunity to work in different industries and on different products, and for short periods of time or slightly longer periods of time. So you're not tied to one thing in particular. And that was a huge appeal to me because I really didn't know what industry I wanted to be in.
Awesome. And also, one question that's coming through from Katerina is, what was your specialization that you took during your CareerFoundry program?
Yeah, I did the UI specialization, and I did that because I knew it was my weakest point. I knew that I didn't have a lot of experience, like in graphic design or making things look nice, and I really wanted to have a better sense of that eye that you need to know that something looks right. And I also, yeah, I knew that that was my weakness, and that was something I would have to work on to be employable. And I'll say that even now, it's still my weakness and still something that I have to work on. I think knowing what your weakness is really important, because then you can address it. It's not just something that you ignore, but something you can turn into your strength. So that's why I decided to work on that.
Awesome. During the main programs, maybe for anyone listening who doesn't know, but for the main CareerFoundry Career Change programs, everyone does a specializations. There's quite a few that you can choose from. Another question for Gayla, and it's a follow-up question from Jace, is as a career changer, how does one get past the recruiter who doesn't see or appreciate the transferable skills and wants a minimum of 3+ or 5+ years commercial digital experience?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think sometimes we talk about transferable skills, but we don't know how to relate that to UX design. So I was an educator, so I'm a good communicator. What does that have to do with UX design? And I think every question in your interview should be brought back to how you can add value to the company in that specific position. So that means you have to move away from your generic answers when talking to a recruiter. Even tell me about yourself should come back to why you're a UX designer and how your background, your experience directly relates to certain parts of UX design. Clearly, it's not all of it, or you would have just been a UX designer. But you can usually show how you're strong in some points of that process. And I think sometimes we forget that we do that, and we just talk about what we did in the past. But the whole idea is to bring it back to that company, that specific company, specific position, and how can you add value with the skill sets that you're bringing to the table.
Yep. I'll also just add on to that from the other perspective. Definitely had a couple of phone screenings when they were asking for more years of experience that I didn't have, and definitely tried my best to communicate the transferable skills, and sometimes it just doesn't happen. So I think part of you just needs to like be okay with that and don't take it too personally, because you will get there eventually.
And I think it also goes back to your portfolio. If all you have are student projects, it's harder to be taken seriously as a candidate, as a competitive candidate for 3 years experience. But you add 1 or 2 clients in there, and I mean, it can be your grandfather's business, and you redo this website. It's a client, and maybe you did a volunteer project, you didn't get paid, but that's real world experience. It's not a student project. So add those to your portfolio. Go out and seek out those opportunities if that's getting in the way.
Yep. And that's actually really relevant to some stuff that I did when I was in the program. I got together with some of my classmates, and we did a hackathon. And I actually talked about that hackathon in my interview too, just sort of mentioned it, but I think that they really liked that I took the initiative to work on something outside of class. And it was really nice doing it with the other CareerFoundry students, because we were all kind of in the same place. So definitely would recommend that people do that if they have the time to, because it was really helpful.
Sheridan, was another question, William?
No, I was just going to say that we have lots of new students who are thinking about enrolling, and they think, okay, I'm going to be joining this program, this career change program. But, it's a new field, I'm going to be on my own. It's just worthwhile mentioning that every student that joins one of the main career change programs, like the UX design program, does get the support of a mentor and a tutor. And then we have the job prep course, and we also have the career services and career specialists. So it's really the whole kind of package. Maybe Gayla, just a question is just the kind of what support does a student get when they get into that kind of the career services stage, when they're kind of finishing the program? Because I think some people in the audience are probably wondering.
Yeah, you're definitely not on your own. We are here to support you every step of the way, from building your resume to a deep dive into your case studies, to your portfolio, to your professional branding across through your LinkedIn profile and site. We are here to support you. We do a lot of interview prep, but even after you complete our course, we are here to help you until you get hired. So it's not once you've finished the job prep course that you're on your own. We're still here as a support system. Anything that you need, you reach out and we're here. And we do regular check-ins every 2 weeks until you get hired. And we have a lot of support with other students like Sheridan was talking about. We have a lot of Slack channels based on what you're interested in or where you need additional support. So you're never on your own from the time you start until the time you land that job. And even after that, we're still staying in touch.
And one question from my side is that how useful do you find LinkedIn? Is it because LinkedIn is such a, it's so vast. Is it a useful tool, or can it be a hindrance, or should students or career changers avoid it? How I don't know who wants to answer first.
I'll just say that I use LinkedIn a lot when I was in my job search, reaching out to people who were junior or senior designers, or maybe a little bit higher, at companies that I would really like to work for one day. And I think it's important to mention that I did not frame this outreach in the sense of like, I want a job. It was purely framed, I want to hear about how you got started. I want to learn about some of the challenges that you encounter in your work. I want to understand what sets a really good junior designer, because I was applying for junior designer roles, what sets a really good junior designer apart from others, so that I could work on those things for when I finally did have a job. And I'll also mention that throughout my career journey, like from when I actually landed my job or when I had interviews, I would keep these people updated. And I would say, like, thank you again for having that conversation with me. It really helped me work on X thing. And I just want to let you know that I got a job. And, big part of it was because you had this conversation with me, and keeping those people involved in, my life and my story, I think really helped. And along the way, I met some people who definitely gave me their time and looked at my portfolio and gave me recommendations and were very encouraging. So LinkedIn was like a huge part of my process, even if it wasn't the thing that ultimately got me a job. I would say that I met some really great people, learned new things about roles that I didn't know before, and got a better appreciation for some of the challenges that I would encounter as a new UX designer. So definitely something I would encourage people to do.
Yeah, talking about that, piggybacking off of what Sheridan says, I think LinkedIn can be amazing for networking, but I always encourage students to give and not take. You come from a point of, I want to give you praise because I love this article that you wrote and it really resonated with me. Or I saw your portfolio online and this case study is so interesting and it matches my background and I just wanted to reach out. It is giving, giving, giving. And then maybe you ask for an informational interview and then you still don't say, hey, can you get me hired? That's not the point. The point is to network and really build a network of colleagues and UX professionals, as Sheridan stated. So we need to move away from the mindset of, I want to connect with this person so they can hire me, because it's really not how it works.
Yeah. I'll also say that, like, being on the other side of things now and having people reach out to me, and also having that empathy of knowing what it was like to be looking for a job, I totally get it. And I'm so receptive to the people who reach out to me and want to have a conversation, and learn about what I do. And want to be as helpful as them as possible. But if someone reaches out to me and they just like clearly just want a job, I'm like, you got to get to know me a little bit first. It's like dating. I don't know.
One thing also to mention is that obviously during the job search, we have a lot of students who are worried about the kind of, am I going to get a job at the end of this, at the end of the program? Because it is an investment, it's an investment in education. Just to say that CareerFoundry does also offer a job guarantee for peace of mind. So if you're in like an urban city, I think it's over, I think the details are online, but you can read more about that. But it's a 6-month job guarantee, so it's a good thing to just as a kind of like a insurance in your back pocket, because we do get a lot of questions about that. If the audience has any more questions, please just drop them in the chat. We'll try and get around to them. I will pass it back over to Gayla if you have any further questions for Sheridan or vice versa.
So I'm curious to know, what is your favorite thing about your new position? What do you just love about your new job?
I will say, I think 2 things, because there are a lot of things I like about it. The first thing is working with people with really interesting hobbies and creative backgrounds, and sort of opening up to my world of what people are doing in their free time and what they're doing creatively, and how they're bringing in their hobbies and their skills into their work. Like working with people who are really great at animation and can bring that into a prototype in like a really exciting way to sort of make our end product more impactful is exciting. And I think the other thing is the thing that I was fearing the most actually starting my job. I am not much of an extrovert, and I really like sort of clam up when talking to people. But so I was really nervous about being a consultant, because you have to be very confident in yourself and confident in your design decisions and be able to articulate them, and have extended conversations with people. And so I was really afraid about that, but actually I'm realizing now that it's part of my strength, and maybe it's not something I like doing, but it's something I'm okay at. And so when I am in those positions at work, when I'm interacting with clients, I just feel really good about myself that this was not something I was originally good at, but I've gotten better at it. Just makes me feel really good at the end of the day.
Great answer. We have got one question looking, and it's a question that's on everyone's lips, but also to do with salaries. I'm just thinking about the right way to answer it, but are you happy with your current salary as opposed to your previous salary? And I think we probably shouldn't name figures on the webinar, but just in terms of,
I will say that I went into salary conversations with no expectations, because I knew I was coming from the starting spot. I knew I didn't have a lot of background, and so I didn't really have any expectations. But I will say that even if you feel that way, ask for what you think you deserve, and don't be afraid to ask for more, because at the end of the day, like, at least this was my situation, I'll say, the worst anyone can say is no, and don't feel like you're bad for asking for more because of where you are in your skill set, because at the end of the day, they offered you the job. They know you have the ability to complete it. So if you feel like you want to ask for more, don't be afraid to do that. But yeah, I guess that's what I'll say.
And Gayla, the same question to you for a student that's asking, I want to ask for this salary. What would your recommendation be for somebody who's just applying for a new job in a new field and is thinking about this kind of salaries and expectations?
I think you need to do a little research. Your location plays a big part of it. Salaries are much higher in New York City, San Francisco than maybe in the Midwest. So being up to date on the salaries for your region and also the industry. If it's a startup with not a lot of seed money, maybe you shouldn't ask for as much because you've done your research. If it's Google, Ask for all of it. No. So just really understand where you're coming from, who you're approaching first, and then look at your past skills. Does your experience, does it resonate with this particular position in any way? And if so, ask for a mid-level salary. Like Sheridan said, the worst that they can do is say no. We'll give you an entry-level salary. But you can't just ask for the money without coming back and talking about how you're going to continue to add value, why you deserve this, your past experience and skill sets, and how they apply to the position.
I think that's also another situation sometimes when imposter syndrome can creep in, and you've just learned all these new skills and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to be applying for this first job, but sometimes you might think, oh, I'm going to maybe just undervalue myself. But what we're trying to say is just go for it. Put the figure out there, because as Sheridan said, they can only say no. So I also think that's a great bit of advice. Yeah, any other questions? We've got a question coming in from Christina. Do you need to know any code as a UX designer, or is it at least helpful to know some basics, Sheridan?
I'll say that it probably depends on the role and what you're doing. I don't need to know code for my role, but I know other people on my team do know code, and that might help them with specific projects. So I'd say learn code if you want to, and that's something you're interested in learning, because it will help you. But if you don't know it, then that's okay too, depending on the role.
Yeah, I think being familiar with at least some basic terminology is really important to communicate with the developers. Things, like class and divs and things like that, the developers may be using that and talking, and if you don't understand what they're talking about, it can be a communication barrier. But it doesn't mean you need to know how to go in and code everything. It's more about communication and collaboration.
Catherine is asking, Sheridan, are you working remotely, and is finding a remote job really a possibility even as a junior designer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is another thing where luck has a hand, because my company is really flexible in terms of whether someone wants to work remote or not. So I have been working remotely. I went into the office a couple of times, but it wasn't necessary. I'll say that in consulting, it also depends on what the client is doing. And if I had a client where they were in person and I was expected to be in person, which no clients are right now in New York City, then I probably would need to be in person. So I'd say it depends, and I can really only speak to New York, but everyone I know is working remotely or has the opportunity to work remotely. So I think a big part of it is also location. But yeah, I have not gone into the office much.
And Gayla, the same question. So are you seeing on job boards lots of remote positions, or is it kind of a hybrid? Or I suppose as the pandemic progresses, there's lots of different opportunities, and it's a very changing picture somehow.
Yeah, I think the region really plays a big part of it. Definitely in New York City, nobody's going in to the office. Everything's pretty much shut down here. But there are other places in the country where they expect you to go in every single day. So I think it's regional. It depends on the company. I don't think it's difficult to get a fully remote position, but a lot of junior designers want to go in because they want to collaborate in person and have that experience. And they feel frustrated because it's all remote. But you can still learn from your colleagues if you're in a remote position. You collaborate, you jump on with each other. Maybe you're designing at the same time within the same program. So there are a lot of pluses to working remotely and pluses to being, in an office.
Yep. I'll also say that those couple of times that I did go into the office, I think everyone was much less productive because it had been so long since we saw each other. Or for me, it was the first time I had seen anyone. And for a lot of people, they hadn't seen each other in over a year. So I just speak for myself, but I feel like I'm a lot more productive remotely, where people aren't you know, having conversations and stuff, which is great, but, you know, it's distracting.
I think we've also seen that here, also at CareerFoundry, is that sometimes the focus time is more the remote work, and then also people are going into the office, and it's more, you know, more collaborative and more workshops, and it's definitely, I think it's evolving. The picture's evolving the whole time, so we're kind of working out how it's all working out. Are there any final questions? I'm just mindful that the time is moving on. Do we have any final questions to finish up on?
Sheridan, do you have any advice coming from, you know, CareerFoundry graduate to those who are looking to get into UX design or who are in the program?
Yeah, I think take a deep breath. Try not to worry so much about getting a job right now, because I know when I was in that place, that's all I thought about, and it was really stressful. And just focus on the task that you're doing that day, and try to enjoy it as much as you can, because I actually really missed the time when I was a student and learning and had as much time as I could on a project to make it as good as I wanted it, and to learn, take my time learning, because when you're in a job, you don't have that luxury. You have to maybe do things quickly, or don't have the time to teach yourself certain things. And so that was a really wonderful time. So try to enjoy it as much as you can.
Yeah, great
What about
advice.
you? I feel like I have to throw it back at you.
Yeah, I think just jump in there, dive in, and stop thinking so much about what you don't have or what you can't offer, and start focusing on what you do have and what you can offer, and use that to build confidence. Don't be afraid to jump in, and it's okay if you don't understand. I mean, I think I cried trying to learn Adobe XD. Like, what have I done? And it's okay. We've all been there. You're not expected to know everything. It's a learning process. I'm still learning and growing, and so just go for it.
I think that's a great end point. I think that's also a very optimistic end point, and we're all learning, we're all growing. So I'd like to thank you both for taking this time. For me, it's this evening, but for you, I suppose it's closing on lunchtime in New York. So thanks, Sheridan. Thanks, Gayla, for taking your time. Also, thank you for everybody who's joining us. Some great questions this evening. Just to be aware that at the moment in January, CareerFoundry is offering 25 New Year scholarships. And if you would like to book one of those, you can just click the link up in the sticky at the top, or wait a couple of seconds after the webinar and you'll be redirected through. And you can also ask our program advisors any questions that you didn't get around to answering this evening, or whatever time it is with you. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us and taking your time, and thank you everyone else for joining us this evening too. And yeah, wish you a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.